Hello, good morning, beautiful people. Patricia Falchetta here from Social Living Solutions. I'm the family joy expert and I work with children with autism and ADHD and work with children and families who are neurodiverse. I wanted to come on here today to talk about sensory overload and how difficult this is, particularly when our neurodiverse children are younger, and also sensitivity to emotions and picking up on the emotions of others. People that are neurodiverse are in fact very empathic. They're real empaths, and they tend to feel the feelings of others tenfold to what other people feel it. So I thought that I'd come on here and talk about this today because it gives you a bit more of an idea of the things that you will learn when you work with me, and also how to better support your children. So first of all, I'm going to talk about sensory overload and what that means. So for those of you that don't know, most people who are neurodiverse suffer from what is known as sensory overload or too much sensory stimuli, or sometimes they can be under-responsive to sensory stimuli as well. So for example, some people who are neurodiverse have a very, very high pain threshold to the extent where there can be a gash on their leg and they won't feel it until they look down and they see the gash on their leg. Then others will be so hypersensitive to pain that a paper cut on their finger will be like a gash on their leg. So they're the kinds of extremes that we can have with neurodiversity. Now, in terms of sensory overload, with people who are neurodiverse, as each of them are so different sensory systems can be affected. The most common ones tend to be the olfactory system, so your sense of smell and taste. And then the other most common one that is affected in neurodiversity is auditory, but all systems can be as affected. As I said, your visual system can be affected. Your vestibular, which is your sense of balance, and your sense of space can also be affected as well as affects your sense of balance and things like that. And also sometimes people who are neurodiverse will often bump into things and things like that because they don't have very good spatial awareness. So to talk about the sense of smell, so this can affect people greatly and really, really cause for them to have a sensory overload. So they particularly could be sensitive to strong smells. So it could be like the perfume a teacher is wearing in the classroom or perfume a colleague is wearing in the workplace. It could be really, really triggering for them and cause them a sensory response where the smell is so overpowering that they can't focus. For some, it will be strong smells like spicy smells. For others, it can be things like fish and seafood. That is actually a really common one. I mean, most of us don't particularly like walking into a seafood shop, but for people who are neurodiverse, this can often be magnified, like 10, 20-fold to what we might experience. And also, just thinking in terms of sense of smell, I mentioned spicy cooking, things like that. Can also be, when I was mentioning seafood and fish, I wanted to say something, as common as somebody in their class or in their workplace could be sitting next to them eating a tuna sandwich, and the smell could actually make them gag, actually make them feel physically sick. And same with perfumes, same with certain scents and flowers, same with certain fruits too, so things like bananas and that. And bananas often have quite a sensory effect in the fact that they'll make people who are neurodiverse gag because of the texture of the banana. So they will also have sensitivities to certain textures. So so I just wanted to come on and talk about that. And then also the auditory system. So for some of us, for some of people who are neurodiverse, it can be things such as loud noises. So if you think about it, birthday parties, there are lots of balloons. For some kids, for some people, those balloons popping by mistake can cause them excruciating pain, excruciating. And then, so think about the fear that they might have in the classroom. If, for example, they're doing a paper mache exercise and they're using the balloon and they're molding the paper mache on top of the balloon, they will be terrified that that balloon is going to pop and cause them pain and that they're going to react, and then other children in the classroom, or other people around them might look at them. Champagne corks are another one, loud popping. Fireworks, really common. Dogs barking. Now, how can you avoid dogs barking? Everywhere you walk, there are dogs barking. Now, the reason why I wanted to talk about this is to get you to understand an awareness that throughout the day, your neurodiverse person or family member, whether it's an adult or a child, might be experiencing these sensory things all the time until they get to the point where they're so overloaded that it just takes one other thing, one small thing, to just tip them over the edge where they just feel so overwhelmed that they can't cope. So it could be that, they've at work, somebody's been wearing a really annoying perfume, then somebody's eaten a tuna sandwich, then the buzzing from the fluorescent lights might, their sense of hearing might be so strong that the buzzing from the fluorescent lights might have affected them. Then they might get on the tram or the bus to go home. They might be next to somebody with a really bad body odor. And then they could be home, like if they're a child or an adult, they could be at home with the family. And then all of a sudden, if you've got a dog, the dog starts barking. And that's the one thing that just tips them over the edge. A child will quite often have what we call a meltdown in that situation, because they've just gotten to the point where they can't cope. And because children don't have the language and also don't quite have the tools yet how to calm their nervous system back down so that they don't react like this, they will have, they will have a sensory overload. For an adult, it might be that they have to go sit in a quiet room, might have to put their headphones on, listen to music, zone out for half an hour to be able to get their tank full again, to be able to cope again. So that's just, the reason I'm coming on and saying this is because I just want you as parents to be able to give you these tools, get you to think what your child might be experiencing throughout the day, what might be causing them to have these sensory overloads. And also, if you have a neurodiverse partner, as well, to understand how the sensory stimuli might be affecting them as well. So I did want to talk about those sensory overload issues, and then I also wanted to talk about the empathy issue. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is for our little ones at school, or our little and our big ones at school, they could be experiencing all of these sensory issues, and then on top of that, they could be experiencing the empathy and the overload from that. So, for example, and this is particularly with girls on the spectrum, but also happens with boys as well, they tend to be really empathetic and feel someone else's pain or distress in the classroom more than anybody else feels it. So, for example, if another child throughout the day happened to fall over their program, gash their knee open, start crying, they're in pain, that person who is neurodiverse will really, really feel that, really take that on board and really think, how can I, and they might even really want to help this other person, but they might not know how to. They might not have the language to be able to articulate it, particularly if they're struggling with being verbal, but also they just might be too young to have the language. And then also if the teacher is screaming at the class, that will then cause another sensory overload, but it would also cause the empathy for the rest of the people in the classroom. How stressful is this? And then also examples where maybe their friends start fighting in the playground. If their friends start fighting in the playground, they pick up on what both of their friends will be feeling, and then this gives them again this overload of empathy, and they just don't quite know what to do with it. So if you think if they're going through a day, they're getting the sensory overload, then all these other complications are happening at school with friends or with teacher or in the classroom, and they're coping with it all day. When they come home, hey Sonny, when they come home, they just need to be able to rest. They need to be able to relax. They need to be able to have that quiet time. But it also lets you know why they might have a meltdown, why they might be melting down in the car, why that one little thing that you're thinking, why are they reacting to that so strongly? And it might just be because they've just gotten to that point where they can't cope anymore. The same can be with your spouse and partner as well. They'll be coping with those things empathetically in the workplace with things that are going on with work dynamics, with things that are going on with people that aren't getting on with each other, with meetings and the stress from meetings and things like that. So yeah, I just wanted to just hop on here today just to get you guys just thinking about that a bit. If you do watch this, hey Sonny, if you do watch this afterwards, after I've done this live, please put